The foundation of the petrodollar is gone. Okay? It's absolutely gone. What happened to the value of the dollar when President Nixon took America off the gold standard? We saw inflation extremis, okay? And the price of everything went up, okay? Because dollars were being printed, and it became very, very widely known around the world that dollars were being printed uncontrollably. My personal belief is that the entire American government debt could be retired with a stroke of a pen by the Exchange Stabilization Fund. But understand, if they did that, what would happen to the dollar? The dollar would overnight stop being accepted in settlement and international trade. Humanity is becoming enlightened, and the wrongdoings and the criminality in our financial universe are being exposed, and the normies are being brought up the curve, even if it's one or two at a time. I expect a lot more wrongdoings to come to light in the very, very near future. I think we're in the season of change right now. I think the time period between now and Christmas, people will be shocked at the admissions or the revelations that come to light over the next 3 months. I think will absolutely, I said it before, I'll say it again, humanity, in my view, will be slack-jawed.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs. Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We have a returning guest who is acclaimed and requested by our viewers and our subscribers. We're speaking with Rob Kirby. He's a proprietary analyst. He joins us this Friday, September 17, 2021. Rob, thanks for coming back on.
Pleasure to be with you again, Dunnigan.
Our guests are often focusing on different things than you because you have your own way of looking at events around us and connecting dots that many people aren't connecting. And our subscribers appreciate that. They'd like to have you on to hear your outspoken take on where things are headed. When we've spoken in the past, you've been quite outspoken about the proliferation of currency, the US dollar in particular, and why that's leading us, basically the train's heading off the edge of the cliff. I think you were the one who showed us the metaphor of Wile E. Coyote running off the edge of the cliff and standing in midair and hadn't realized he's going to fall. That's that feeling a lot of people have been having, this suspended disbelief over the rules of gravity not taking effect over the last year and a half here. Can you bring us up to date on what your latest analysis is and the latest data we have on that?
Yeah, well, I've been paying particularly close attention to what commentators are speaking about. And I pay particular attention, down again, to people in the alternative press, because you're more likely to be in close approximation to the truth, reading the likes of Alistair MacLeod. In the past, Alistair MacLeod, James Turk, the GATA people, who basically shine a very bright light on the realities in the precious metals market, and a number of crypto commentators who I think have their heads screwed on very securely and in the right direction, like Michael Saylor. These people tend to speak or get a lot closer to the truth than the mainstream financial analysts. But that being said, I think that there are some blind spots, even from a lot of my compatriots in the alternative press, alternative financial press, let's say. And why I bring that up, and the case in point that I'd like to draw to everyone's attention, is a friend of mine sent me a commentary, a weekly commentary by Mr. Alistair MacLeod this morning. And the gist of Mr. MacLeod's commentary this week is that interest rates are going to go up because it's inevitable. And I mean, it actually makes sense if you believe, if you believe the data that you're given by officialdom, it makes sense that yes, interest rates should back up. But I don't believe interest rates are going to back up. And the reason I don't believe they're going to back up is because the thesis that they're going to go up because it's inevitable is all predicated on the belief and the utterances of officialdom about how much money truly exists in the world. And most measures of money supply typically involve examining things like M1, M2 data, we don't get M3 data anymore. And my understanding is they're going to even stop reporting on MZM, which is, let's put it this way. We're getting less and less information as time goes along about the true nature of the money supply. That's not good, because especially when record amounts of debt are being created, that's just not a good thing. So what else is there about money? What other indications do we get about money? Well, often people will point to the Fed's balance sheet. And I mean, in the last year alone, the Fed's balance sheet has grown from, I think it was mid-3s trillion to 8.2 or 3 trillion currently. So the Fed's balance sheet is swollen by, call it 5 trillion in the last 12 months. That's a pretty big increase. But the reality is, I don't believe that these measures nearly capture how much money there really is. And you see, when you're predicating or you're building a tower based on the assumptions that you have about how much money there is, it can lead you to making false predictive assessments. Like Alistair MacLeod in his most recent, and I want everyone to know, I appreciate and respect Alistair MacLeod's analytical capabilities. I do believe, however, he's using false assumptions or false basis to make his assumptions on. And if he had the right assumptions, I think or if he had the right data, I think his assumptions or his thesis would be something closer to what I believe. So, and the way I see it is this. I follow the work of Dr. Mark Skidmore very closely. Dr. Mark Skidmore has done investigative, he's an expert in public finance, by the way. He's a PhD economist. He occupies a very prestigious chair at Michigan State University, and he's got a brilliant research staff underneath it. And he's been, or in his latest iteration of work, he took very close look at the Social Security Trust edifice of the American government. And that's where retirement funds and retirement assets are managed on behalf of the American public. And his latest work centers on the year 2019. So the numbers I'm about to spit out are just from the year 2019. And Skidmore's work shows that under the umbrella of the Social Security Trust Administration, there's roughly $400 billion worth of investable assets that are managed. And in that latest year, where data is available or was available, Dr. Skidmore, using the government's own numbers, he showed that $400 billion in investable retirement assets was turned over or churned to the tune of over 44 trillion in 1 year. That, to me, Dunnigan, is a massive, massive neon sign saying fraud, scam, bad things are occurring here. My belief is that this is highly indicative that money is being created, which isn't making it into our monetary aggregate data. And then, of course, people are going to say, well, Rob, where's all that money? Where did it go? Well, I've spoken at length over the years about an edifice called the Exchange Stabilization Fund. The Exchange Stabilization Fund is a black box. It was created in 1934. Its sole mission was to perpetuate the use of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It's beyond oversight by anybody, and it's managed, basically, I believe it's managed by the intelligence community now. And its activities, in my view, are treated and viewed as a matter of national security and national interest, which basically means anything that it does is game and fair game. So, and understand the numbers I just threw out, a $44 trillion churn in 1 year, that's just 1 year. And if that's going on a yearly basis, I'm suggesting the Exchange Stabilization Fund might have 10 trillion in it, it might have 50 trillion in it, and it might have 150 trillion in it. This I call this mad money. And this mad money is what America uses to create outcomes in our capital markets which are counterintuitive to what you would expect. Let me elaborate on that a little bit more. In the past year, we saw the likes of Russia divest themselves of all American-denominated assets in their sovereign wealth fund. That meant that they dump any and all U.S. government bond holdings that they would have had. And what would one intuitively think if a major holder of U.S. government securities were to dump and throw all their securities onto the market? One would typically and intuitively be correct to assume interest rates should back up.
Right.
But what happened instead? Those bonds that Russia sold, they disappeared like into the ether. In my view, they were memory hold. And what happened as a result of Russia dumping all their U.S. government-denominated stuff? Interest rates rallied. Doesn't make any sense. Like, you know, you don't need to be the sharpest knife in the drawer to say that is counterintuitive. Should not have happened that way. Absolutely not. And we see this occur and have been, you know, witnessing this occurring, this kind of stuff. Countries swearing off the dollar. I mean, what else has occurred recently? Boy, we saw the fall of Kabul, where the Taliban effectively licked the U.S. military. A day after Kabul fell, the Saudi Arabians signed a defense deal with the Russians. Well, that used to be America's job. And that used to be the underpinning of the petrodollar standard, which we've been on since, what year? 1971, when President Nixon closed the gold window. A deal struck with Henry Kissinger meant that to put us on a petrodollar standard, Saudi Arabia would only sell their oil for dollars. And in return, America would provide protection to Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia agreed that they would recycle their petrodollar earnings into U.S. government debt to float America's financial boat. Well, that deal got canceled, okay, because Saudi Arabia now has a new protector. Days after the defense pact was announced with Saudi Arabia, America pulled all their Patriot missiles out of Saudi Arabia, and all their advanced defense capabilities were removed. So, you see, I look at it this way. You know, the foundation of the petrodollar is gone. Okay, it's absolutely gone. What happened to the value of the dollar when President Nixon took America off the gold standard? We saw inflation extremis, okay? And the price of everything went up, okay? Because dollars were being printed, and it became very, very widely known around the world that dollars were being printed uncontrollably. And we saw very, very, very stiff inflation. So what do you think we're going to see now that we've taken away the foundations and the underpinnings of the petrodollar? we're going to see lots more inflation. And of course, we have many, many, many shills for the establishment saying it's transitory and it won't last long. Well, guess what? I think differently, because America is like a heroin addict in terms of their need for more and more funding. That's not going away. If anything, their addiction is becoming worse. They're issuing record amounts of new debt, and there is no appetite globally for the new debt. So where's the debt going? You see, and this flows back into Alistair MacLeod, who I respect, but this flows back into his underlying assumption. Interest rates, he thinks, are going to back up because it's inevitable, because America's financial house is a mess. And it is a mess, and I agree. But what Mr. MacLeod fails to take into account is that we have this entity called the Exchange Stabilization Fund. I'm guessing it probably has well over $100 trillion. And my personal belief is that the entire American government debt could be retired with a stroke of a pen by the Exchange Stabilization Fund. But understand, if they did that, what would happen to the dollar? The dollar would overnight stop being accepted in settlement and international trade, because the whole world would realize that America's hoodwinked the rest of the world, and they've been screwing them with the dollar. And that's no way to foster peaceable geopolitical relationships around the world. When you basically admit you've cheated and conducted yourself in a fraudulent manner, managing the world's reserve currency. So, but this is the ugly predicament we're in. And this is why, in my belief, what I'm describing here, in my view, is what's at the root of virtually all geopolitical global tension. And if we could somehow get back to honest money and honest commerce, honest finance, a lot of our geopolitical differences would disappear. All that being said, I don't like the aggressiveness and the militarist posture of communist China. I am anti-communist. But I'm anti-totalitarian, and I'm absolutely anti the way our world's reserve currency is currently being managed and has been managed, because to me it just reeks of the most colossal fraud that humanity has ever been that we've ever experienced. And it's unthinkable how bad it is. And that's why people have a normalcy bias and people don't believe how monstrous the fiat fraud really is. People just don't. And, this has not ever been allowed to express itself fully at all in our precious metals markets, because the powers that be have the ability to sell unlimited and infinite amounts of metal in paper form on the exchanges of COMEX and LBMA, and the pricing or the price discovery mechanisms I just mentioned, they cannot tell the difference between a physical ounce and a paper ounce. And as a result, the only price discovery mechanisms we really have that are accepted in the Western world happen to be those futures exchanges I just mentioned. This expresses itself by huge premiums being paid for physical metal in reality over the paper price. We can look at the COMEX futures price of gold and futures price of silver, but all I can suggest to you, and you know this better than anyone, go into your local precious metals dealer, or even Miles Franklin, who you work with. I mean, you can't buy an ounce of silver really that close to the paper price. I mean, I receive. I'm on Miles Franklin's email list. You guys are running a special right now, and it's actually a good deal relative to other deals that are available in the market. And I mean, it's a special when you can buy an ounce of silver, $7.25 over spot. I mean, that in itself should tell you something's wrong. I mean, because the nominal price in the futures market for an ounce of silver is around $23. You got to pay over $30 to get a physical ounce. What does that say to the paper price of silver? It tells me that it's false, because that's historically a big spread over the paper price. And I'm not saying in the last year that's a big price, but what I'm saying on a historical basis, that is a huge, huge premium. And that's because there's a disconnect between pricing of physical ounces and what it costs to get a physical ounce out of the ground and what they're pricing it at in the paper markets. So as a result, to make an assumption that it's inevitable that, interest rates are going to go up, I don't think interest rates are going to go up, because the Exchange Stabilization Fund, many, many, many untold trillions, I call it dark money, and that dark money is and has been being mobilized for a very long time now, and it's mobilized to keep things appearing like all is well. And you can use, there are great analogies to explain, what it's similar to. Like you watch a duck glide across a nice smooth pond, and it looks graceful, but you get a little snapshot of the view under the water, and the little web feet are paddling furiously, and the picture below the water and above the water, they depict two different stories. Mm-hmm. All looks good on the surface, but under the water, things aren't quite as graceful as they appear above. And you know what? Our monetary affairs work, and metaphorically work the same way. The powers that be want everything is fine, okay? And they want us to believe that markets function the way they should. I mean, when you have somebody printing money, the way money is being printed right now, you would expect interest rates to go higher. But the reality is they're not going to go higher, because there is a reservoir of money that is being used to basically monetize debt and memory hold debt. And therefore, it doesn't appear that we're in problems. But we have problems, and boy, do we have problems. That's my story.
A lot of our viewers are very concerned about the type of global geopolitical stresses and strains. It's affected us for decades, maybe centuries. This whole thing of constant global wars, hundreds of military bases around the world, et cetera, et cetera. There's a real human cost to that. Not just for the U.S., people have lost loved ones, et cetera. People have lost a lot of their finances going into that adventuresome sort of empire building. But it's also had a very toxic effect on all kinds of people all around the world. It's a big deal. If part of what's driving all that, or if maybe even the main thing that's driving all that, is this dishonesty and dishonest weights and measures that are in our money and in our commerce that's causing all those strains, are there ways that people who, either mining companies, refiners, that sort of thing, can opt out of that system? Can we just walk away from the COMEX and the LBMA, for example? Can we just start dealing directly and form networks of organizations and provide honest trade based on real money?
Well, you see, Dunnigan, I think we've seen the thin edge of the wedge of this coming down the pipe right now. What do you think is behind Saudi Arabia's new defense pact with Russia? To me, it spells that the Saudi Arabians are now going to be selling their oil in any currency they wish to, and it won't be all dollars. They will now be selling their oil, I think liberally. They'll be selling their oil in Chinese currency. They'll be selling it in euros. They might even sell some in Russian rubles. They might demand gold in payment from some people, but the dollar's exclusivity in the petro trade is, as far as I'm concerned, it's finished. And what that implies is that a lot of dollars are going to be coming home. And if we had free and fair markets, that would mean a huge sell-off or a rise in interest rates, as Alistair suggested would happen. But you see, my belief is that that debt will just be monetized in memory hold, and they're not going to allow interest rates to go up. To be honest with you, Dunnigan, I don't believe America can afford to pay market rates of interest, period. Their debt's too big now. So interest rates, in my view, will be held at zero. And what we likely see going forward, I suspect, and I'll be honest, I hope I'm wrong, but I think what's coming between now and Christmas, I think will leave most of humanity absolutely and utterly slack-jawed. The underpinnings of the dollar are gone. Saudi Arabia is no longer committed to sell their oil in only dollars. They've got a new defense deal with Russia. America has pulled their Patriot missiles and their advanced defense technologies out of Saudi Arabia. In my view, the whole topic surrounding the virus and the solution, which is the needle, as far as I'm concerned, that's a scam of epic proportions. And then we've got this small issue over in the Canary Islands, where there's the threat of a Manhattan-sized slice of land falling 6,000 feet into the ocean, which could create a tsunami that would wipe out the entire east coast of North and South America. Anyway, it just seems to me, I don't want to see any of these things actually happen, but it just seems to me everything's coming to a head at once. And it all adds up to not a very good picture for the dollar, not a very good picture for humanity, and not a very good picture for America as the world's preeminent superpower going forward. We're in tough times. We're in a tough spot. And I don't see us skating out of this, in a cavalier, nonchalant way. We got our backs against the wall here. And I hope and pray this doesn't end in a big nuclear conflict, because it seems to me, what did we see just yesterday? We saw the announcement of a new defense deal with 3/5 of the formerly Five Eyes, namely America, Britain, and Australia, are now colluding to give Australia a fleet of nuclear submarines. Well, that was met this morning with denouncement by China, and basically China takes it as a threat. And I mean, this is not good. And I also noticed it also exposes fissures in what was formerly, the Five Eyes is maybe now become the Three Eyes. And I understand why they wouldn't want to include Canada, I'm gonna even now refer to Canada as a former member of the Five Eyes, because to me it's now a Three Eyes movement. And I understand why Canada was excluded. I mean, we have a sitting prime minister in Canada, and hopefully he won't be sitting in that chair much longer, because we have an election next week in Canada, federal election, and I'm hoping that Trudeau's bounced out, because Trudeau is a communist China he might as well be the chairman of the China Adoration Society. I mean, the man has publicly stated that the country in the world he respects the most is communist China, because they have dictatorial power. Anyhow, no consultation was made when this new defense pact to give Australia nuclear submarines. There was no consultation or invitation for Canada to participate in those discussions whatsoever. And I'm not saying that they were obliged necessarily to do so. I mean, and it's quite a reflection that, they don't care for Justin Trudeau has communist tendencies, absolutely, like his father. And, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and it hasn't in his case. To me, the man's despicable. He's the worst thing that could have ever happened to our country, but we're stuck with him at least for another few days. And all I can say is God help Canada if he comes back with a majority government. Because if he comes back with a majority government next week, I expect he's going to cozy up even more to the communist Chinese. And I mean, we're not in a good position. And I mean, so anyway, getting back to the reactions to the announcement of this new military deal, UK, the United States, and Australia, even one of our NATO partners is furious with this development, and that's France. France is very upset. France had an existing and maturing military deal to help modernize Australia's military using French technologies. And the French are quite upset that their deal is maturing and it's not being renewed. And instead, Australia seems to be going in a different direction with new partners on the military front. And that's very much upset France. Well, that to me is like a big rift in NATO. So none of this speaks well to cohesion in the West. And it's not good stuff. Our monetary affairs are in very, very sad shape. And financial fraud has been engaged in my view, in the Western world, the likes of which will be recorded by the history books as being the biggest scam in the history of humanity. So that's where we're at. And boy, there's going to be no easy road out of this.
There's a question here that is right along the lines of what you're saying. And I guess you're already talking about signposts on that road. ICE9 says, how quickly will the petrodollar be dumped by other countries, and how much inflation will that cause in the U.S.?
Well, I did say a little bit earlier, I believe that what occurs between now and Christmas will leave humanity slack-jawed. And I'll stand by that. And I hope I'm wrong.
We've got related questions about when you talked about the manipulation that's reported by GATA and others on the COMEX and the LBMA. Robert Wilson asks just for a clarity of how that is actually accomplished. He says the bullion banks often smash down the price of metals to take out the long stops and then buy back to ride in the recovery. Who are the suckers that keep getting taken by this action? If the banks are making money at it, then someone is losing. Who?
Well, I guess technically, if you want to look at it this way, Dunnigan, when I started writing about metals, the price of gold was under $300. Okay, and that was, call it 2003 or 4 time frame. Now, I just want to point out that in 2003 or 4, the price of gold was under $300. And today we're at 1,800. So it's gone up by a factor of 6. Okay. Now, the house I'm living in sold in 2003 for $525,000. Okay. And today, the house that I'm sitting in right now as we record, this house today is probably worth $1.7 million. So it's gone up by a factor of, call it 3 and small change. The price of gold's up by a factor of 6, and everyone talks about it like it's a crap investment, and it hasn't performed. Well, you know what? This house has gone up by a factor of 3, and people think they're geniuses because they own a house. So let's just put it this way. Gold has doubled the brilliant investment called real estate, but it's shunned on by the mainstream financial press. Gold hasn't done so bad. Gold's done pretty darn good. And, the sad thing is gold should have done better. You see, gold should be behaving the way cryptocurrencies have behaved. And then you say, well, why haven't they? They haven't because, you see, the funny thing about blockchain protocols prevent rehypothecation, which means you can't sell a Bitcoin 500 times that you don't own. Mm-hmm. If you own a Bitcoin, you need to own a Bitcoin to sell a Bitcoin for all intent and purpose. Yes, there is a futures market for Bitcoin, but let's just say it's not very big and it's not that robust, and you can't sell infinite Bitcoin you don't own. You don't own. It just doesn't happen. Can't happen. Bitcoin inherently leaves because it's decentralized and it's open ledger. There's a record of where every Bitcoin ever created, where it is, and who owns it. That's not the same for metal. Metal can be sold into existence. Metal that will never, ever be mined can be sold on a paper exchange. So a logical extension to that, some people would say, well, then, Rob, you sound like you're crapping on gold. No, I'm not. I'm not crapping on gold at all. What I'm saying is it's been stymied. What I'm saying is we've taken all the gold and we put it in a pressure cooker and we've screwed the lid down real tight to prevent it from doing what it should do. There will come a day when this manipulation and this seemingly welded on lid to the pressure cooker holding the price of precious metal down, there will come a day when those screws will be loosened. And there will come a day when the metals will become. I honestly believe that we will see rises in the price of metal on a percentage basis that will make the rise in cryptocurrencies look small. I honestly think I'm going to live to see that, and I'll say there, I hope. And all that being said, that might be a big hope because I nearly died a couple of years ago. But I plan on living. I want to live. And I think we are all living in a time where we are going to see the exposure of this financial crime against humanity that has occurred thanks to the powers that be, who, in my view, I think we're going to live to see the powers that be become the powers that were. And I think a lot of them are going to dangle from short ropes. And you know what? That'll be a very fitting end for them when it occurs.
It's been remarkable to many of us how much wrongdoing has seemed to have gone on in the past. You could pick any number of decades, and yet it seems that justice has not been served. And it seems that the misdeeds are being done more brashly, more brazenly, and more in our face, whether it has to do with finance, politics, elections, all kinds of topics where it seems like...
Exactly. To all the people out there who say, Kirby, you've been saying this for a long time, and, when is it ever going to end? And it seems that it just goes on forever. No, things have changed on again. And the brashness and the interventions have become more and more blatant, and they reek of desperation. And, it's becoming... if you ever listen to the utterances of Cliff High, he talks about the fact that we have moved from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is the age of knowledge. And, humanity's becoming enlightened, maybe not as fast as we'd all like to see, but humanity is becoming enlightened. And the wrongdoings and the criminality in our financial universe are being exposed, and the normies are being brought up the curve, even if it's one or two at a time. Hopefully it'll be, my view is the people who become clued into what's really occurring, the rate of change and the pace at which people become informed, it's increasing. The world's changing at a very, very fast pace right now. And I expect it to heighten even more. And I expect a lot more wrongdoings to come to light in the very, very near future. I think we're in the season of change right now. I think the time period between now and Christmas, people will be shocked at the admissions or the revelations that come to light over the next 3 months. I think will absolutely, I said it before, I'll say it again, humanity, in my view, will be slack-jawed. Me too. And I know it's coming.
Well, Rob, if people want to follow more of your work, where should they get tied in?
Catch me on the web at kirbyanalytics.com, and usually hanging out with people like you, Donegan, because you like to tell the truth.
Well, we're trying to help people be aware and prepared, and the truth is absolutely necessary for awareness. Folks, so that you don't miss out on any of our interviews with Rob or any of our guests, make sure you go to libertyandfinance.com, and right out there on the homepage, put your name, email address, and click submit. You'll get a confirming email. Respond to that, and you'll get every one of our interviews sent to you in your inbox, in your email, with the link to the interview, the link to the SoundCloud if you want to listen to the audio only. You'll get the description and any links that our guests provide. You won't miss out on anything. So that's completely free, and only a small fraction, about 3% of our subscribers on YouTube have taken advantage of that. You don't want to miss out on that. As always, Rob, on behalf of all of our viewers and all of our subscribers and myself, I just thank you for joining us here on Liberty and Finance.
My pleasure, Donegan. Pleasure being with you.
This is Donegan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs.